All right, a question I get asked all the time is what is the difference between active range of motion and passive range of motion, and why does that matter? And the quick answer is passive range of motion means I'm using something external to create the range of motion, versus active means I'm using the muscles to take me into an end range. So let's quickly look at this in Supta Padangusthasana, okay? When I lay down, and I use my arms. Even though these are attached to my body, I'm using them to create more range of motion in the back of my leg. So as I'm here, I can pull my leg into this position. This is passive range of motion because I'm using my arm to create more length or more range in the back of the leg. What active range of motion would be, I'm going to use my hip flexors to pull my leg into this position. And this is as far as my hip flexors can pull my body into position, which means that this is my active range of motion. When I use my arms, this is my passive range of motion. And there's always going to be a gap. I can always use external leverage and pull deeper than I can with my muscles, but we want to minimize that, right? Why? Why is that important? Why is it important that we have a better balance between active and passive range of motion? Well, think about injuries. When do they tend to happen? An injury tends to happen when something goes too far without enough strength. So when I slip and fall on ice and my arm goes into this end range and I tear my shoulder, because I don't have enough strength in that end range. So when we train active range of motion, we are training the body at end ranges to be strong. Okay, so that is why it's a big difference. Downward facing dog is a passive stretch. Why? Because I'm using the leverage of my body and gravity coming down. Okay, versus, so we take a look at it. Downward facing dog, passive range of motion because gravity and the V shape in my body. Versus if I come into child's pose and I lift an arm off the floor. This is active range of motion. Why? Because I'm using the muscles to take me up into position, and then I'm fighting against gravity versus using gravity to go further, okay? But again, we want to create more active range of motion because from an injury standpoint, injuries tend to happen when we don't have enough active range of motion in an end range. Also, when I train active range of motion, I am creating more passive range of motion. When I'm creating passive range of motion, I am not creating active range of motion. So from an efficiency standpoint, you got 60 minutes in yoga practice. When we work active range of motion, we're creating both. When we work passive range of motion, we're only working passive.